Coming up on this week's episode of CEO Yourself.
Starting again and knowing that you might have to take a step back before you really kind of get the benefit of the kind of bigger move that you've just made. So cut out the noise, cut out things that don't ultimately contribute or don't allow you to kind of connect the dots to be predictive of the future. I think that you fall a little bit flat. And this is going to be true in any industry. It's going to be true in any companies that you want to be known for at least one thing to begin with. And once you have that one thing and people know and trust you to be the person they go to for that one thing, then you add a second thing. And then you add a third thing. But really the starting point is...
Ashley Wallace is a managing director in equity research at the Bank of America. She heads the bank's European Consumer Discretionary team. Ashley is the #1 luxury goods analyst globally and was named by Forbes magazine as one of the 30 under 30 most influential people in finance. Ashley Wallace, welcome to CEO Yourself.
Thank you for having me.
I apologise, it's literally 3,000 degrees in the studio today to people listening
Boiling.
and watching at home. And we're definitely not dressed for the occasion, so bear with us. Thank you for being here. I am so excited about this episode, as you know. You are someone who has long inspired me in so many ways, but this is a very important conversation today because we're deep diving finance. Talk to us about the world of finance and your job within it.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So I'm going to start by saying the world of finance is such a big and generic term. It's, it's not a job. It's an industry and it would encompass thousands of jobs, and all of those jobs would have very different skills, very different levels of intensity, very different criteria to getting into that. So there's no such thing as a finance job, really. Nor, if we think about other industries, the umbrella of, say, fashion or marketing, they're industries, they're not necessarily jobs. You could be, creative director or a manager of a fashion brand or work in a store and still be working in fashion, but they obviously come with very different skill sets and criteria. Finance is exactly the same. So my job in finance is something that we would call equities research. And essentially the best way to think about it is almost like it's a job in which you're a stockbroker. Although stockbroker isn't even really a job that in finance anyone necessarily has. But I think it's the best way to kind of describe it to those who aren't in the industry. And the job that I have is in the consumer discretionary industry in Europe. So that would mean that I'm responsible for all the companies that are listed in Europe in the consumer discretionary space, including industries like the luxury goods industry, beauty, retail, food retail, online companies. So it's very, very broad. And the idea about the purpose of the job is ultimately to understand the industry very well, to understand the companies very well, and to ultimately give investment advice to hedge funds or pensions funds about which companies they should, or which stocks really, they should buy or sell in the European consumer discretionary landscape. And the way in which we would do that is by predicting the company's earnings and valuing the companies, and then understanding where potentially something is mispriced. So where we see scope for the company or the stock to go up a lot or the stock to potentially go down. And I would say within this job, it's a very transparent job. We have ratings on the stocks, we have price objectives, and it's very transparent for people in the industry to know whether we're right or wrong. So every single day, your rating's kind of on the line. You're either getting it right or you're getting it wrong. It is one in which it's extremely transparent, and that's kind of the intensity that probably goes into the job.
You're extremely humble, but I'm going to let the listener know that you were recognised by Forbes in the 30 under 30 in finance, and you are currently the #1 luxury analyst in the world. That is no mean feat, Ash. How did you get to where you are today?
It's a good question. Obviously, in finance, the kind of basic understanding is that you work hard, which obviously that's happened in my career. But I think if I look back at the three kind of important periods or choices that I'd made in my career over the last decade or so, I think that there's probably 3 decisions that helped me get to where I am today. The first one was really way back when I was in university. And at that time, I was doing a summer internship in my first year of university. And actually, my boss had just left right at the end of the program. And the senior manager in the department at the time asked me to see if I could stay on through school or through university to help out, essentially. And I restructured my university course to allow me to spend 3 days in the office. I would do night classes. I would squash all the lessons into 1 or 2 days. And that would allow me to ultimately have 3 days in the office, which is something that probably wasn't extremely common for someone who hadn't finished university at the time. But it also gave me an opportunity to have 2 extra years of experience that others in the same kind of doing the same degree wouldn't necessarily have. And so I think that for me at that point of my career, really, very early stages, I made a very active decision to prioritize work experience over getting the top marks that I possibly could at university, because I didn't have the ability to do both. And I really kind of lent into the idea that I was going to demonstrate and learn on the job rather than learn in the classroom. And I think that gave me a kind of a leg up when it came time post-university to getting a full-time job.
I did the same. We went to the same uni, and I got a job at LVMH and did the same and restructured my uni degree. And it did make it a substantial difference, because when I left uni, I was already expecting higher salaries and bigger positions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you were able very early on to make strategic decisions about where you wanted to go, but also to prioritize your career, which is what you've always done.
Yeah, exactly. And it would mean the same as you. On university holidays, I was working almost full time rather than, taking those holidays to kind of be on the other side of the world or doing things. So prioritized very early in my career, leaning in, I would say, to building my experience. Mm-hmm. I would say then the second thing happened when I was in my mid-20s, and so a couple of years into full-time work, and my now husband and I decided to kind of leave Australia, travel for a little bit, move to the other side of the world, and arrive in London with essentially no job whatsoever and no experience in this market, which I also think is quite important and what people would ultimately be looking for as someone of my level coming to the market. And I think that was a pretty big risk as well, but paid off. And we were talking about it before. I think when I got here, I literally did 1,000 coffees, and it was a really bad time because it was essentially the banks were firing people and going through massive redundancies. No one was hiring. And so it just meant going out and really trying to make an effort to get in anywhere. And actually, I ended up getting my job after having met someone for probably 5 minutes in a coffee shop. He didn't have the time really to sit with me. He said hi, left. That kind of door was closed. And 6 weeks later, he called me back to say, hey, I know we only met for 5 minutes, but someone in my team has just left. And why don't you come in, meet the head of research? If you can kind of convince him to give you a job and me a headcount, because at this point, I'm not going to be able to replace the person who's just left. It's a win-win for both of us. So over to you now. You go and try and get this job for both of us. And I ended up getting it. But I also was hired as a contractor. I was hired at a title which was below my title in Australia. And I think that also knowing that if I got that opportunity, I was going to be able to work hard and demonstrate that I can do this job and I was good at it and that it would pay back later on. And so really for me, it was just about getting into the industry here. And I think that was probably quite an important thing because the market in Europe is obviously significantly bigger than Australia. It's just much more on a global scale. So I think that's probably been one thing that's been quite pivotal as well, is just kind of starting again and knowing that you might have to take a step back before you really kind of get the benefit of the kind of bigger move that you've just made.
Again, it's so important for the listener, whether you're pivoting after having children or you're pivoting from a career that you thought you wanted to be in and you don't want to be in anymore, or pivoting personally to a new country. Mm-hmm. I think it's so important, and something that we love to do here at CEO Yourself is debunk the glossy kind of surface image that you see, and for people to know that, you know, you had to have setbacks to get where you are. You had to knock on 1,000 doors and have 999 of them closed. And it's all about tenacity and hard work and just showing up and believing in yourself, which you've always done.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that that's super important. And then there's probably one other thing I would say as well is that I then, a couple of years later, got given the opportunity to take over coverage of the luxury goods sector myself, which was a big step up then in terms of opportunities. And when I had that opportunity, I also took quite a big risk when I came out and kind of launched coverage on the sector, because at the time, which was 2014, we actually came out with quite a negative view on the luxury goods sector and quite a negative view on one stock, which is called Swatch. They obviously own the Swatch brand, and then Omega and Longines and many brands within the watch industry. But at the time, it was the market darling. And I think most of the sell-side analysts had the stock on a buy rating. And we did a lot of work to show why the watch industry would be going through structural pressure over the next couple of years. So really, I think even when it was an opportunity for me to kind of come out the first time with my own kind of like brand within a new sector, taking a risk to say something different, I think was also something that was extremely important and pivotal to my career. I was right.
Yeah. Was that because of the rise of iPhones and things?
It was a little bit the rise of iPhones. Yeah. It was also during a period where China was going down the route of like cracking down on corruption in China, and watches were a category where there was gifting for non-personal reasons that led to ultimately a significant destocking in the watch industry in China that lasted almost 5 years. And Swatch was highly reliant on China growth up until that point. So the growth engine in the business had kind of been turned off for a while. And then at the same time, you had essentially the overlay of like the Apple Watch coming out and smartphone risk. And so that meant that the outlook for the industry changed, and the multiple that people wanted to pay for a watch company completely shifted. And this was essentially our thesis, is that you've got these incremental headwinds coming into the industry that pose a threat.
So the reason we're looking back is because your incredible choice of CEO superpower is connecting the dots, which, as I said to you and to the listener at home, is actually our visual logo at CEO Yourself, because I'm so passionate about connecting the dots. And I was hoping and praying someone would choose this superpower one day, and it happened to be you sooner than I thought. So why did you choose connecting the dots, and what does it mean to you?
Yeah, sure. So I picked connecting the dots because of the fact that it's almost my job on a day-to-day basis. So when it comes to understanding what's priced into a stock's share price or not, it really is an industry and a job in which you have information coming at you like every other minute. One of the pieces of information is where the share price is trading, but the other is, you have companies reporting numbers, you have information coming out about different industries, you have, we're scraping websites of companies to understand who's put a price increase through, things like this. And ultimately what we're doing is putting together pieces of information. By the way, this is pieces of information that probably a lot of my competitors also have, but we have to be smarter about understanding how to put those pieces together to better predict the company's earnings or to better predict the company's share price as a result. And so it is the kind of bread and butter of what I do every day. And I think for me, how do I connect the dots in my professional life is probably 3 layers of information. So there's the macro element, which is what's happening in the world around us, what's happening with interest rates, are we going into a recession, and how does the kind of global kind of environment influence the stocks. But I think that it's also relevant for a lot of people who have their own businesses. Just it's a very important layer to kind of understand what's going on around you, or and the decisions you make will ultimately be predicated on the macro environment in lots of cases. The second is what's happening in the industry. The industry dynamics become extremely important. And then the third layer is ultimately what's happening at the company level. And the ability to put together those pieces of information ultimately allow us to better predict share prices or not. I think that's extremely important, because ultimately I think that the most important thing is that connecting the dots allows you to make more educated decisions about any aspect of your job or career, even if it's not necessarily ingrained in your day-to-day.
Steve Jobs was very passionate about connecting the dots. And I love this quote from him. You can't connect the dots going forward. You can only connect the dots looking back. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in the future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. This approach has never let me down, and it has made all the difference in my life. Can you reflect on your perspective of connecting the dots and Steve Jobs? Because I do think they're very similar.
Yeah, so for me, connecting the dots and this quote from Steve Jobs ultimately talks to us about learning retrospectively and looking at what's happened in the past to help us make more informed decisions about the future. And I think that that is extremely important to be able to do. It makes us go into conversations in a more educated way. It makes us pivot when we need to in our career or in other aspects of our life. And I think one of the things that's quite important about learning from history is also really kind of understanding where we fail, where we make mistakes, or why something didn't go as we thought it would, and learning from those failures and those mistakes, building that into lessons, and being able to ultimately pivot and make different decisions in the future. Otherwise, I think you end up getting to a situation where you're doing the same things over and over again and probably making the same mistakes again and not really getting anywhere. And we were saying before that, I also like this quote from Einstein, which is basically insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And I think this ties very nicely into the Steve Jobs quote, because it is that we need to pivot when things aren't working, and we need to have lessons from the things that aren't working. So for me, how would I kind of implement that into my professional life? I think that there's a number of ways that I would do that, whether I was in finance or something else. So for me, it would really be starting with have as much information as possible. Make sure that you're very well understood as to like what's going on in your industry, what's going on in your company, what's going on around you. There's lots of information for you to be able to make a decision. The second is, with all that information, it's also sometimes quite important to cut out stuff that's not relevant. So cut out the noise, cut out things that don't ultimately contribute or don't allow you to kind of connect the dots to be predictive of the future. Because the most powerful, I think, dots that you can have or information that you can have is something that ultimately allows you to look at what's going on today and the information you have today to make a better decision about the future. And I think that often it requires space in your diary, space in your mind to be able to think about those things and clear kind of the noise of the day-to-day to make time for the things that are strategic decisions that ultimately will play out in a more powerful way in your career. So for me, one thing that I do that's very important is have blocks of time set in my diary on kind of like a weekly basis for me to do things that are not urgent but very important, because otherwise I find that I get tied down in the busyness of the day-to-day, responding to emails, doing things that are like firefighting rather than actually think about where do I want to be in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and what am I putting in place today for myself and for my team to ultimately allow me to do that. And then I think that there's also an aspect, the more senior you become, that's very important about building scale, and how do you build scale in the things that you're doing. And often it means giving up things, to be honest, and building a strong team around you. So there's an aspect of putting a lot of time into your employees or the people in your team to train them to be able to take things from you, to create more space in your day for strategic thinking and strategic decision making. And I think that this is something that is quite important about, putting all the pieces together to be able to then make the best decisions.
We're going to loop back to that, because how you have time to do anything is shocking to me, and you're obviously incredibly good at using your time. But what I want to touch on there specifically is knowing your worth, because you are able to break things down in such a pragmatic and considered way, and you've advised me so well in my career. You are able to find a clear number for anything, whether it's what you're worthy of in terms of your salary or your bonus or, you know, what you should charge a client, because the way that you've helped me break it down is so helpful. Can you please describe for the listener out there who is wondering, okay, what is my worth? What is my value? What should I charge? How do you go about it?
Yeah, so I think that the way that I think about it, again, kind of tied together with connecting the dots as well, is first of all, knowing your true value and the kind of place you have within the ecosystem that you're trying to be a part of. So if your job within your company, your consultancy or whatever it is just having confidence in your ability to deliver that. Because I think confidence is the starting point of knowing your worth, really. If you don't have that self-confidence, it's very hard to go in and kind of like fake it, I would say. The second point is having very clear conversations and having clear conversations upfront. I think often people find themselves having conversations after they're disappointed after the fact. And I think that what's very important is to have conversations upfront about what does success look like? What would success look like for in the eyes of your manager, who's going to be the one to ultimately give you a promotion or pay you at the end of the year? Or what would success look like for the brand that you're consulting for? Or I think that that's very important to understand from the other person's perspective what success looks like. It would be even better if success looked like something that was measurable rather than something that is in the gray. It removes ambiguity. If there's like a defined KPIs or deliverables that can be agreed upon as to like, if this happens, then would you get that promotion? Would you get that next job? Would you get that bonus? So I think ultimately having very clear conversations with measurable KPIs or deliverables is very important upfront.
It's so very helpful, and I hope the listener out there, wherever they are, if you are avoiding a conversation like this because you're nervous of the outcome, please book the meeting, ask for that time, go and have the conversation, because it's much better to know upfront, as you said, rather than after the fact.
Exactly.
Don't get another year down the line and then be disappointed. Go and have the conversation now.
Exactly. And I think if you also set clear intentions, then it also allows for you to both be on the same page. So, hey, I would like to be promoted, and what would I need to do to get that promotion is quite an important conversation, not even the year of promotion, but in 3 years, what do I need to do? So you know what exactly you need to work on over that time period to get you to where you want to be.
And backing it up with hard work.
And backing it up with hard work.
Oh, like yes. If you know how hard you work and the value you add, it's much easier to stand by what you're valuing yourself at.
So, for example, like what's happening in the industry, are employees going through a period where they're hiring a lot of people because it's growing, or is there a lot of pressure that exists in the industry and actually they're thinking about how to save costs, and like you need to be conscious around like what's going on in the kind of environment that you're operating in. How do you go into conversations with some benchmarks around where do people get paid at similar levels at different employers, people that have the same type of following as you. How do you define ultimately what you're worth? What does it cost you to get there? All of these things are important factors, I think, that allow you to go in, again, with much more educated conversations. And none of these conversations should ever be coming across in an aggressive way. It's just coming across in a very educated way. Hey, I know these 3 things. And if I know these 3 things, then why is the conversation all the way over here? And it just changes the parameter of the...
It builds confidence,
like
right?
Confidence, yeah, exactly. And the negotiating power to a degree of the conversations.
There are 2 points here that I kind of want to bring the conversation back to. One is time and one is work. You have the most incredible ability to work at a pace that I have rarely ever seen. But on top of that, you're the most incredible wife, mother, friend. You make time for your friends. You throw the best kids' birthday parties in the world. You're the class rep on top of everything else. I think the listener is going to be with me in wondering, how do you do it all? And how do you have the capacity to to the level that you do that has allowed you to know your worth?
Yeah. It is, yeah, it's true. And I'm not afraid to say it. Like, I work extremely hard. There's no doubt about that. But I also try to make sure that I have very clear boundaries in my life and very clear priorities. I want to see my children every day. So I am in the office before they're even awake. My husband helps me. He does what we call the morning shift. And so he looks after the children until they go to school, until our nanny arrives. And when I'm in the office all day, I am completely present and focused on what I need to get done in that day. At the same time, I'm the first person to leave the office at 5 o'clock every day because I want to get home to see the kids before they go to bed and spend time with them in the evenings. And as soon as I walk in the door, I'm in kind of like mum mode. My phones go into my office. I'm completely present for my children for that kind of period of time that I have with them, knowing that, it's not a huge number of hours, but I want the hours that I'm there to be extremely valuable to them. So I go for like quality over quantity in terms of time. And I think that I try to do that in all aspects of my life. Is like, I'm here and I'm completely present and focused on what I'm doing. And that allows for, I would say, like, people in the office to kind of have my full attention. They know I'm not distracted by doing 1,000 other things. And then when I'm at home, my children don't feel that they're competing against at all my job whatsoever. I'm there with them, reading my daughter a book at night, playing Lego with my son. And my children ultimately feel like they're my number one priority, as they should, because they are. So I think it's really just about the boundaries, but also it's also my husband. He helps a lot. And for us in our family, it's very important that we both have important jobs. We both also take important responsibilities when it comes to parenting our children, that it's extremely balanced.
You are the truest example of a team, you two, and you have such an incredible marriage. How have you set that up as a dynamic duo?
I think the reality is that the foundations that we both have are very important in terms of like, what do we want our children to also see? We both want to be extremely present for them and be hands-on with raising them, which is extremely important to us. And I think it's extremely important probably for them as well when we think about the type of children that we're raising. My children don't see mom having a girl job and dad having like going out to work and being the person to ultimately fully support the family while I bear the brunt of the parental responsibilities. They see that, their dad is fully involved with all aspects of their parenting as well as I am. And I think that ultimately helps break down kind of some barriers for, my daughter in the future, is that we're growing children, we're raising children that will be very well-rounded.
I hope you're loving this week's episode. To find more inspirational resources and to shop our new product range, visit ceoyourself.com. Ash, what would you say to the listener who is thinking of going into finance or who is interested in a career in finance? What would your advice to them be?
I would say that there's probably 4 pieces of advice that I would give to someone thinking about going into finance. The first one would be really understand the different jobs that exist within finance, because they're going to be extremely different depending on what you're looking for. If you're someone who enjoys something that's extremely fast-paced and wants to react in the moment, maybe something like being a trader would be good for you. If that doesn't necessarily sit with who you are as a person, but you want to have a little bit more structure in your day, you want to work on longer term strategic priorities, you can pivot and do something more in investment banking. So like, it really is understanding the different types of jobs in finance and understanding what aspects of that finance job would fit who you are as a person, I think is the most important thing, rather than just thinking, I want to be in finance and it kind of doesn't matter what job it is, because I think that the job underneath kind of this finance umbrella again is extremely important to understand. The second aspect I would say is do it for the right reasons. I think some people probably think that I go into finance because it's a great industry to go into. It's well regarded in society. My parents would like it if I was in finance, and that doesn't necessarily bring into the industry people that have the passion for it. And I think that it is an industry which is highly competitive. It's an industry where obviously there are long hours that are required, and really to kind of like lean in and do well. I think you want to know that this is something that you want to be doing for you, and that's where your passion is. And I think that's part of like where my drive and stamina for the industry comes from. I love my job. I want to be in the industry, and this is a very important factor to kind of consider. I would say the third thing is that you might not necessarily get your dream job from day one, but getting your foot in the door, getting some experience is extremely important. And often what we see is that once you're in, it's very easy to move around, particularly in some of the big banks. Like lots of them will have programs that allow you to move internally. And so we're really just kind of like getting in is the most important starting point, I would say. And then finally, get ready to work hard, basically, because it's the nature of the industry that, you know, everyone that's there is smart. It's kind of the minimum requirement to get in. You don't have to be the smartest, but there is an aspect of working hard, especially I would say at a young age, which allows you to excel quite quickly. You know, there's this concept of the 10,000 hour rule, which is that to develop a new skill, it takes 10,000 hours. And the reality is the faster that you get there, the more opportunities that are going to come your way.
It is quite an intimidating industry though. So I appreciate that today you've debunked the myth around it being impossible to enter and navigate, because even for me, I look back and think I was too nervous to apply for anything in that space. But if you have a strong work ethic and you are passionate, you can achieve anything in any industry.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Which is so wonderful to hear from you.
Yeah, exactly.
Ash, what is your legacy piece of advice, how you'd want to be remembered?
So I have 4 legacy pieces of advice that I would give your listener. The first one is to be famous. The second one is to be brave. The third one is to be annoying. And the fourth one is to be a listener. And what does this actually mean is probably quite important. So to be famous ultimately means starting with the idea that you need to be the go-to person for at least one thing. If you try to be everything to everyone, I think that you fall a little bit flat. And this is going to be true in any industry. It's going to be true in any companies, that you want to be known for at least one thing to begin with. And once you have that one thing and people know and trust you to be the person they go to for that one thing, then you add a second thing, and then you add a third thing. But really the starting point is to allow for people to know you for one thing first. And I think that this is quite important. The second point around being brave is really taking risks and leaning into like what your gut is telling you. Again, connecting the dots, using the information around you to make educated decisions that allow you to kind of do that 2 standard deviation move away from your peers. And I think that this is something that really kind of helps people like excel, is ultimately this bravery that can come with knowing your worth, connecting your dots, but then having information to allow you to make those very brave decisions. The third is be annoying. And this idea is just like be a hustler. Don't give up. You know, if you send an email to try and get a job, that's not enough. Like you do that, then you go for coffees, then you lean on friends, and then you try and network, and then you look at all aspects of like what you can be doing to get ahead. So like it's very important, I think, to emphasize to people and to kind of hustle to get ahead and get what you want. And then the final piece is really about being a listener. I think that some of the best ideas that I've had comes from listening to the questions that people ask me, listening to even things that I couldn't necessarily answer on day one and thinking, hey, why couldn't I answer that? Let me go and do a little bit more digging and see if I can come up with something that makes sense in terms of the problem that I was trying to solve. And I think being a listener to your listening to your manager's feedback, listening to your client's feedback, listening to your feedback from other stakeholders in your business is very important to kind of coming up with new ideas or thinking or being able to pivot things that you're already doing.
Your advice is so invaluable, and I cannot wait to share this episode with our audience. You are the finest example of a CEO and the CEO of your life. So thank you so much for your invaluable time. Where can the listener find you?
The listener can find me on LinkedIn. So if you just look up Ashley Wallace at Bank of America, you'll be able to find me and connect with me there.
Thank you so much. It would mean the world to me if you would share today's episode with someone you feel would enjoy it. And don't forget to hit subscribe, like, and leave a comment.